Here's what nobody tells you about leaving an abuser. The abuse doesn't end when you walk out of the door. It tends to follow you in your head, in your choices, and in every relationship that comes after that. This is what happened when I tried to outrun my trauma. My name is Shamiria Bailey, and this is No Sugar on the Rocks. I told you about the two cancers. Now I'm going to tell you how I beat both of them. This is the victory episode because I need you to understand something. Victory doesn't look like a movie. It looks like moving back in with the mother who you said failed you because you had no other options. It looks like barely surviving. It looks like choosing yourself even when you have no idea what's coming next. Episode 4, The Day I Left. So at this point, domestic violence was perpetual in my relationship. And although I was not being beat up every day, it wasn't once a week, it wasn't even once a month sometimes, but it was perpetual. And I knew it was coming. My nervous system had learned to brace for it. This particular time, this day was the last day of like a 3-day disagreement. He had felt challenged by me by a statement I made, and he'd spent the last 72 hours literally raging through the house. I lay in bed that night, and each time a door slammed or something dropped, it scared me. And at some point, I decided that that was not going to be my life. I wasn't going to lay in the room, scared to come out, fearful of what was happening or what someone was planning to do. And so as I lay awake in the dark, I began to plan my great escape. We shared one home, we shared one vehicle, and we shared one business. We did everything together at this point. So I knew leaving would not be easy. I knew that leaving would come with a sacrifice that at that point I was okay with. To our vehicle, we had 3 sets of keys. And on any normal basis, that was his go-to. I'm going to take the keys and I'm going to remove your ability to leave. And so knowing that this very next day was going to be the last day that he had access to me, I knew that if I had any chance at all of actually getting away, I had to be in possession of a set of those keys. And so I knew that next morning when I got up, I would locate a pair. There were a pair of boots right outside of our front door. I would place those keys in those boots. That next morning, we get up. I wake up. I come out of the room like nothing is wrong, like any other normal day. Except this day, I have a plan to get out of the house. We've been arguing. So come on, Jaden, let's get dressed, get some clothes on, and let's go. I get my son dressed, and I notice that it has started to rain. I'm going to stick to my plan, and we're leaving either way. So as I'm getting him dressed and I'm pepping him up and I'm making sure that he's nice and energetic, I've also located the keys and set them inside of this boot. With the door open, I called to my baby, who's at this point about 3 years old. And I'm like, come on, let's go outside and play in the rain. Of course, he's excited. As I join him in the yard, I grab the keys out of the boot as I back my way down the stairs. Door wide open. At this point, he notices me. He comes to the frame of the door, peering at Jaden and I calmly say to him that today's the last day. This is it. I've had enough, and we have to do something about this. I tried to explain to him that in order for this to be a clean break, we both would go without something. I assured him that he could take the car if he wanted to and I would stay in the house, or he could stay in the house and I'll take the car. But we were going to be without one thing or the other. And he could decide what that thing was because I was just so ready to go. He gave me a familiar smile and said, I'm not doing either. I'm not going to go without either thing. If you want to go, bye. But I'm not doing either. I say to him that I'm going to get in the car and I'm going to leave. And I pull out the set of keys that I had to let him know that I was so serious. I could see him shuffling with his feet, uneasy about what to say or what to do next. I'm sure realizing in this moment that shit might have just gotten real. When I noticed his face changed. I also noticed neighbors standing on the porch, just some houses down. We lived in a duplex, and this duplex was in a cul-de-sac, one way in, one way out. So I screamed to the ladies that I could notice just a couple houses down, and I say, listen, I'm trying to leave with my son. When I go towards this car door, if this man comes off this porch, please call 911. Those ladies held up their phone and signaled to me and this man that they were prepared to do just that. And right when I thought I had figured it all out, he began to call my toddler back inside of the house. And initially, I started to call him to me, but the back and forth became increasingly overwhelming for my baby, and he began to cry. And so as he began to get upset, I stopped calling his name. I knew that the ploy was to get me back inside of the house, so I got inside of the truck instead, hoping like hell that the God that had just spared my life from cancer was going to be the same God that ensured that my baby was safe. But I had to commit to leaving. So I got in the car and I called his mom, the first phone call, and I said to her that I don't want any problems. And I'm not trying to have your son in jail, but he better send my son out of this door before all hell breaks loose. While I'm on the phone with her, he's approaching my vehicle. So now I'm realizing that he ain't just gonna stop. So I hang up with her and I proceed to crack my window to beg him to just give me my child. By this time, I'm creeping enough so he can't catch up with my car, but backing up so that I don't get too far away from the house because, again, this is in a cul-de-sac. After a couple of what felt like hours, I'm sure it was just a few moments, the neighbors all start to surround my vehicle. Everyone is around and there's this big commotion, and he is still actively trying to make access to my vehicle. The neighbors are all screaming that they're calling the police. There's even a neighbor out here with a taser that she's sounding off every so often. And she seemed more afraid than I did, but I was so grateful for the support, at least in the moment. While a neighbor stands just to my driver's side door, my window down, answering the questions that the cops are asking on the phone. This man jumps his full body inside of my driver's side window and snatches the keys out of the ignition. The car is now inoperable, stuck in the middle of the street. By the time that he snatched the car keys out of the ignition, he's also managed to get the car door open where he's yanking and pulling, trying to get me out of this vehicle. I'm hanging on to the steering wheel for dear life, and this feels like it'll last forever. More moments pass, and the police finally pull up with me literally wrapped around the steering wheel with both of my arms and this man pulling me. I'm thinking that the police are here and help is finally here and someone will finally help me resolve the situation. Hell, at this point, I have at least 10 eyewitnesses to this level of abuse. He's stopping me from leaving. I'm being held against my will. My child is crying. I know for sure that help is here, only for the police to lock him up on an FTA, which is a failure to appear on a traffic citation. Never family violence, never battery, never assault, never domestic violence, never anything else. And before the cop leaves, he lets me know that my husband will be taking the car key that he just snatched out of the car to jail with him. And there was nothing that law enforcement could do to prevent that from happening. They assured me that due to us being married, all of our assets were shared, marital assets, and they could not and would not make him do anything. Not for me, not for the sake of this child, not for anything. So they park the truck back in the driveway and they take him off to jail. So now he's gone, but temporarily. So I'm still stuck with the burden of figuring out how the hell do I get out of the situation. And in pure narcissistic fashion, he calls almost as soon as he gets there. And he asks me, if I'm able to get a friend to come bring you some money, will you come bond me out? Completely perturbed by the request, I asked, well, how could I do that when you just locked the vehicle keys up in jail with you? And in that moment, God showed up like God always does. And my husband says to me, well, we have 3 sets of keys. And if I tell you where the other set of keys are, will you promise not to take the money and run off? oh, I can 100% promise not to take the money and run off because I'm going to run off without the money. Okay. So I agree. And he tells me that the spare key is in the sun visor just above the driver's seat. I locate that key. I call my friends and I tell them that they have about 8 hours to get to the house right now to help me pack this truck with as much shit as I can take. And I'm leaving right now today. I have two friends at that moment, one closer than the other, and she's emotional and she's crying. And I'm promising her that, listen, you got to give me 6 weeks. Give me 6 weeks to get it together. And I promise I'll be right back. But if I don't leave right now today, I never will. I'll never be able to leave. And I have to go. My life depends on it. And so we ordered pizza and soda and played music and we had a packing party. And we packed all of my son's stuff and only my necessities inside of my blue Yukon XL. And I planned to leave that night. And at that time, I had never driven a distance. This man had driven me everywhere, our entire relationship. I told y'all before that I got my license when I met this man. But in this moment, whether I knew the roads or not, I could do the basics of driving and I had a maps. And so I was getting the hell up out of there. I had $50 to my name. There was no insurance on this truck and the tags were dead. And still, I was getting up out of there. I chose to drive at night because at the time I have a toddler and I'll drive when my son is asleep. So that way he's not cranky in the car. If I'm panicked, if I'm emotional, he won't experience any of my turbulence with me. I knew the condition of the vehicle and all the laws that I was breaking, but I also had a vehicle that was packed down with anything that I had left to my name. And I was prepared to whatever cop were to stop me for me to tell them, listen, I'm running for my life. If you could just get in front of me and get me home, that would be great. At this point, I had nothing to depend on but myself and the trust that I had in the God that had kept me through all this bullshit this far. And I did. I got on the highway in the middle of the night and I drove 7 hours from Hubert, North Carolina to Monroe, Georgia, where I gave out of gas on Highway 78. I gave out of gas, but I was so close to home that relief took over before stress could have any say so. I remember calling my friend right there on the side of the road. It had to be 2 a.m. And I'm like, girl, come get me. I'm on the side of the road. I gave out of gas. She like, what? I'm like, I explain everything when you get here. Shout out to having good friends, man. Jamil Ivy, you the one, baby. But I remember her coming to pick me up and me explaining to her all that I could in that short period of time. And at that time, me and that particular friend had both shared a similar traumatic lifestyle. And so we both were very accustomed to grief and discomfort. And so she was happy that I was there, but we both were very relieved that things had gone the way that they had gone up until that point. I remember her dropping me off the very next day at my mama's house. I gave my mother no forewarning, no text message, no heads up. I just showed up. She opened the door, completely shocked to see me standing there with my son. No vehicle, no husband, no man, no invitation. But she let me in. She let me in and I filled her in. And before that moment, she had never known that that man had ever put his hands on me. I realized in that moment that he had intentionally crippled me. It was at one point I'm riding around before he got out of jail that he had the bail bondsman call my phone to ask me to come get him. I'm on the phone with a stranger who's telling me how good of a man that the man that just got finished abusing me was. And I told him, like, I'm not in town. I can't help him. He called me from jail and I answered literally on the highway. And I told him the same thing. I'm not in town. I can't help. He didn't believe me. Well, where are you? I'm in Georgia. He said, you don't know how to get to Georgia. You can't drive to Georgia. And it was in that moment that I realized that the chauffeur privileges that I had been given the entire relationship was simply to cripple me, was simply to stop me from having an escape. Realizing how calculated this all was really scared me. Yeah, it really put life in perspective for me, intentionally so. Shortly after I got to my mom's house, Jay started coming up and down the street. So I realized that he had gotten out of jail. The moment that I realized that he was out of jail, I knew that I was leaving yet again, 6 weeks tops, like I had just told my friend. I went to work almost immediately. I started working at a car dealership. I was in a customer service department and I made good money. I saved every check that I had and I sent it to my friends back in North Carolina. I assured my mom that I only needed about 6 weeks and I was going to be out her hair. Me and my mama did not get along, but my mother was and still is the strongest woman that I know. If she does not know how to do anything else, she absolutely will survive. And so, being in that place with her at that time, she was able to perform her greatest for me. I found my mother to be lacking of emotional capacity. My mother has never been a soft landing. She's not the place that you go to vent, to cry, to be weak and vulnerable. My mother is a problem solver. She's the place that you go when you want to change the situation, when you want to do better, when you want to get out, when you want to move on. And so I didn't go to her house grieving. I went planning how was I going to get my 2 feet back under me after being seemingly kept by a man that was taking care of me and my son. I worked for 6 weeks and I literally moved right back to Jacksonville, North Carolina. I had sent all of my checks to my friends. Every place that I was finding online, I was sending the address to my friend. She would go. Amber the Gemini, shout out to you. She would go to all of these different properties and she'd message me back and say, not this one, not this one. This house is in the hood. This house is ran down. This is in a trailer park. Not this one, not this one, not this one. And she was one of my bougie friends. And so I trusted, I trusted her word. And we finally found one. We finally found me a home for my son and I. It was just the right amount of money that I could afford. The rent was only $500. And so I set out right then and there to leave again. I bought my U-Haul. I told my mom I had a property. I had rented a house for me and my son, and she was more than happy to send us on our way. My mother was so happy that she gave me damn near every piece of furniture out of her house. She told me that I could have whatever I needed to help myself, so long as I helped myself. Although I was physically alone and I was looking at life now as a single mom, I never stopped dating. I started dating as soon as I left this man. And that was a part of my survival instinct, is what I learned. That the constant running from something and running to something else was the pattern that I had just curated over my very, very, very short life at that point. Simply looking for support, looking for stability, looking for structure, looking for guidance, looking for love that didn't hurt, looking for someone that wouldn't take advantage of me, right? I could not wrap my head around being a young person in the world, a young woman in the world, and being tormented unprovoked. And so it was either accept that everybody was bad or look for the good. And so I kept looking. It's like this shift with this failed relationship turned me from a person that had spent their entire life running to someone, running to other men, running to my friends, running to my mom. This turned me from a person running to something and someone into a person running from everything and everybody. Imagine running from people, places, and things and not even really even being sure where you even are to begin with. I get to my new destination in Jacksonville, North Carolina, in a new relationship, literally immediately. And although that relationship was not successful, it was necessary for me in that point in my life. But that relationship would prove to be different than the relationship that I had just come from. And that relationship would be the beginning of me getting to decide what relationships meant for me. I worked as soon as I got to Jacksonville, North Carolina, several jobs. I had 3 part-time jobs. I was the cash office manager at Kmart. I worked at CC's Pizza, and I also worked at Witch Witch. I was a single mother determined to not be needy, not be in need, not be broke, not be homeless. You know, I was finally in control of my own future and the future of my son, and I took that seriously. So while dating this new person, I was still determined not to let anybody else take me under. That relationship was very short lived when I found that man cheating, talking to another woman. I hadn't dealt with infidelity at that point. I had dealt with domestic violence, but just like that was a thing of the past, I was not about to adopt a new trauma. So I go from dating, because this is what I know. This is how I know to help myself. Someone to split the bill, someone to split the responsibility, someone to split the time, someone to share parenthood with. That was short lived. And so now I'm back at square one with no help, no support, and no assistance. So what do I do? Think, Shamiria, think, right? So I was driving a Yukon XL and it was costing me about $100 a week in gas at that moment. So in my mind, I'm thinking, well, if I can get a smaller vehicle, it'll take less gas, then I won't need so much help. And maybe that'll, you know, set a couple of these other expenses even. That'll help balance the scales a little bit. Well, I don't know anything about cars or buying one, right? The only car I'd ever bought was the one that my husband went with me to get, and he checked it out. And my husband was a mechanic in the military, and so he knew how to do these things. And I mean, he did say that this child was his too, and that he would still be his dad. And so, what do I do? Young, naive, lost, without boundaries. I let him come help me. And at this time, I'm thinking, yeah, we're not together, but what would he get out of doing harm to me? I have my own money and, my own resources, and I just need his help finding a good car. He spent every dollar I had intentionally having me buy a lemon. I ended up selling my truck and buying a lemon. And after I bought said lemon, my friends shared with me that he had shared with him that that was his plan all along. That if he had gotten me a car that needed work done, I would trust him to do the work. And that's how he would win his family back. And all I could hear, see, and feel was deception, was coercion, was manipulation, once again, at the hands of this man. Winning the war is just the beginning. Then you have to figure out who you are after everything has tried to kill you. And that's really the hardest part of it all. Coming to terms with you have nowhere to turn but yourself sent my life in a complete 360. I left Jay in April. I beat cancer by summer. I moved to North Carolina around August. Everything happened so fast. I thought that that was the end of this story. I thought I genuinely had won, and I had, but I didn't realize that winning was just the beginning of a whole new battle, the one that I had to now fight with myself. The next episode, I'm going to tell you about the moment that it all changes again, and this time for the better. My name is Shamiria Bailey, and this is No Sugar on the Rocks.